I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
The two-state solution is on life support. Reviving it requires collective action. Peace cannot be a transaction or a partial, temporary arrangement.
UN officials call for a long-term solution to end the conflict between Israel and Hamas and raise more concerns about the amount of aid getting into Gaza.
On a global level, it's one of the most serious food insecurity crises in the world.
Amid conflict and scarce resources, Haiti faces a battle with hunger and malnutrition.
More than half of the world's population are worried about their economic situation in Iran.
Combating uncertainty and inequalities that threaten global advancements. A conversation on the push for social development. Next.
The situation in the Middle East topped the agenda here at the United Nations this week. There's increased concern over humanitarian conditions in Gaza amid a new Israeli offensive.
At the United Nations on Wednesday, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process told the Security Council that any two-state solution is on life support and that it's time for decisions, not declarations. Sigrid Kaag addressed the Council just hours after large crowds of Palestinian civilians rushed an aid distribution site in the southern city of Rafah. Thousands of hungry Palestinians tore down fencing and climbed over barriers in desperation to get food. Israeli forces reportedly fired warning shots into the air.
Aid cannot be negotiable, and there can be no question of forced displacement. Civilians in Gaza have lost hope, Mr. President. Instead of saying goodbye, see you tomorrow, Palestinians now say, see you in heaven. Death is their companion. It's not life, it is not hope.
Over the past week and a half, Israel has reportedly allowed 300 UN trucks into Gaza, but the UN says 500 to 600 are needed each day. However, the aid distribution where Palestinians rushed the site was managed by the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. At the Security Council, the US representative reaffirmed support for Israel and blamed Hamas for the failure to reach a ceasefire agreement.
Hamas continues to reject proposals from the United States, Qatar, and Egypt that would release the 58 remaining hostages who have now been cruelly held for 600 days and bring calm to Gaza. Every day, Hamas demonstrates its lack of regard for the Palestinians it claims to represent, all while it violently suppresses protests against its barbaric rule and diverts aid meant for civilians.
China, meanwhile, highlighted the hunger crisis in the enclave and renewed its calls for Israel to halt the fighting and allow more aid into Gaza.
面对上述质问，中方强烈重申。
China firmly reiterates that a durable ceasefire in Gaza cannot be delayed, and Israel must immediately cease all military operations. Israel must lift the blockade, fully restore humanitarian access, and support UN and other international humanitarian organization efforts to provide assistance.
It's now reported nearly 180,000 Palestinians have been displaced since Israel's latest military offensive started. And the Security Council calls are growing louder for a lasting peace in the region 600 days into the war. Mitch McCann, CGTN, New York.
From the Security Council to the briefing room and beyond, Shu Deja is monitoring the latest developments inside the UN. Deja.
Yes, Elaine. It is a short week, but still packed with events and news here at the United Nations headquarters. The third UN Ocean Conference, co-hosted by France and Costa Rica, is set to take place in Nice, France. Ambitious goals are expected, but the real question is, can they actually be implemented? Will there be any mechanisms to ensure the outcome of this declaration can be executed?
As you rightly observed, that we don't have a specific mechanism in this draft outcome document to monitor the implementation. But perhaps you also notice that every 3 years we would have this regular UN event to review the progress on implementation, and also we will draw the lessons on the implementation process, so that I hope that our member states will certainly accelerate the implementation based on their voluntary commitments.
This Thursday marks the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. To honor the occasion, the Secretary General laid a wreath at the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. What does Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under Secretary General for Peace Operations, have to say about the current state of peacekeeping missions?
Cost effectiveness. For us, maybe it's two words, cost and effectiveness, and these are dilemma. If you lower the cost, how can you keep the effectiveness at the same level? Do you worry, are you going to cut the numbers of staffers out there? Are you going to shrink the existence? How are you exactly going to do that?
If you can use drones to observe a situation in a given area, then you save a lot of money, because instead of sending heavy sort of vehicles with a lot of people and costs a lot of money, and it's also, you know, putting at risk the peacekeeper, then you just use the drone and it saves a lot of money. It's as efficient. It has to be just a very important part of our effort. And yes, cost, effectiveness, but ultimately in terms of, you know, making sure that we deliver as best as we can on the mandate.
Also this week, the Security Council held a briefing on the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. Sigrid Kaag, the UN's interim special coordinator for the Middle East peace process, issued a stark warning. Palestinian Ambassador Riyad Mansour also broke down in tears during his statement. And the briefing wasn't the only development. On the first day of the aid delivery through the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Fund, chaos erupted. Reports say that 47 people were injured by gunfire as the operation went out of control. So what does the UN have to say about all this?
The system that we had, right, was not perfect. Nothing in Gaza is perfect. We're not claiming that. But it's a system that worked. And we saw how it worked during the ceasefire.
Wouldn't you feel it would be better if you incorporate with the Gaza Humanitarian Fund so that this chaotic thing couldn't happen?
It's not a matter of us crossing our arms saying we're not
well,
going to cooperate.
Well, you're experienced.
What we are saying is that for us, humanitarian aid needs to be distributed in a way that is safe under principles of independence, impartiality, in the way we've always done it.
And there is also a familiar scene, a blame game between Israel and the United Nations.
As we speak, there are more than 400 trucks already on the Gaza side of the fence, waiting to be distributed. But the UN has failed to pick them up. We opened the crossings, we provided safe routes for those trucks, but the UN did not show up.
Does the UN believe that Israel is purposefully hampering the efforts of the UN humanitarian operation?
Look, you have to ask them what their motivation is, but I can tell you they sure ain't making it easy for us.
The UN is using threats, intimidation, and retaliation against NGOs that choose to participate in the new humanitarian mechanism.
When was the last time we threatened anybody?
So you denied it, right?
We're not in the business of threatening people. I mean, when did... you'll understand what I'm saying. I'm not going to go any further. We're not a threatening organization. Unfortunately, sometimes.
Meanwhile, in other news, in January, Nawaf Salam resigned as president of International Court of Justice after being nominated as Lebanon's prime minister. On Tuesday, Mahmoud Dafallah Hamoud was elected to the court through a parallel and independent voting process held simultaneously in the General Assembly and the Security Council, both by secret ballot. And that's all from me. Elaine.
Shudaja, thanks. Thursday marked the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. There are 11 current peacekeeping missions around the world involving more than 76,000 civilian, military, and police personnel. A peacekeeper with a mission in South Sudan spoke about the importance of patrols for the Blue Helmets.
It's not just about checking security or monitoring the situation. This real value is it keeps us connected with the local communities, especially vulnerable groups. Every patrol is a chance to talk with the people, listen to their concerns, and build that essential trust.
Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda. The conflict in Sudan is fueling a regional health crisis. The WHO says rates of malnutrition and diseases like cholera, measles, and malaria are rising both within Sudan and in neighboring countries, hosting those who have fled the unrest. 2024 was the warmest year on record, but the World Meteorological Organization says there is an 80% chance of that record being broken at least once in the next 5 years. There is also concern about the Arctic, where temperature elevation is outpacing the rise in other areas. The economic toll of natural disasters is increasing. A new report from the Office for Disaster Risk Reduction shows events like floods and earthquakes costs the world more than $2 trillion a year. That's 10 times higher than previous estimates.
Coming up.
It can be done. It's possible to lift millions of people out of poverty.
UN Insider.
Inequality, economic uncertainty, and distrust are posing significant challenges for development around the world, according to the newly released World Social Report. What can be done to address these issues and boost social development? I sat down with Björg Sandkjær. She is UNDESA's Assistant Secretary General for Policy Coordination. Thank you so much for joining us, Assistant Secretary General.
Sure, thank you for having me.
What would you say were the big key takeaways from the 2025 World Social Report? And if you can, explain the principles of equity, economic security for all, and solidarity, and why they are so key to sustainable development.
Absolutely. I'd like to just show the report because we're really proud of it here at UNDESA. And it really showed some quite interesting developments in the field of social development. So I'd like to start by really underscoring that when we look back and compare with 1995, and we had our big social summit in Copenhagen, we have seen great progress. More than 1 billion people have escaped extreme poverty, for example. But what the report shows is that while we have made progress in many areas in social development, that progress is under threat. And in some instances or some respects may even be slipping away. We have a number of almost 1/3 of the world's population, while not in extreme poverty, are at the next level of poverty and are at risk of slipping into poverty. I'd hoped to had moved away from that. We see wealth inequality increasing. So more of the economic prosperity that we are achieving in the world is accruing to the wealthiest people, so we see greater inequality. The biggest message from the report this year is how we see growing distrust. So the inequality, but also the perception of inequality, is fueling distrust, and that threatens social cohesion.
Does it seem that the social safety nets that a lot of countries and regions have had is become less with the resources not being as much, governments having more higher priority issues to deal with? Does that lead to people feeling insecure?
What our analysis shows is certainly that there is a great feeling of insecurity across the globe. It's not limited to one region. More than half of the world's population are worried about their economic situation and about the safety for themselves, economic security for themselves and their families. We know that of the roughly a third of the world's population that are just above that extreme poverty line are 1 or 2 less paychecks away from slipping into poverty. But the biggest risk factor from what we've seen in our analysis is medical expenses. So that unexpected big healthcare bill can push a family that otherwise would be able to manage over that threshold into extreme poverty. And that tells us something about where we need to enact policies. And it also shows how important it is to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal on universal health coverage.
Conflict and climate change, I mean, those are big factors in contributing to some of this insecurity. Can you tell us more about what is being done in those areas?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. When we look at where we find the extreme poverty today, we see that it is concentrated in areas of conflict. We have never had as many wars in the world since the Second World War. So that risk is increased. And the compounded with environmental degradation, climate-fueled extreme weather events and disasters that push people into poverty, but also keep communities in poverty. The problem with conflicts and that kind of these kind of disasters or external shocks is that it's very, very difficult to create the conditions that you need to have a sort of a sustainable development, the steady development that you need to enable people to get out of poverty. So again, we can't just do one thing in isolation. It's all interlinked.
Do you have any success stories or any regions or countries that are making good progress that serve as an example of what you hope others can work toward?
And what we've seen in China with 800 million people escaping extreme poverty in a relatively short space of time serves to illustrate that it can be done. It's possible to lift millions of people out of poverty. What China did through economic transformation, through rural transformation, through getting people jobs, to increasing productivity, but using the outcome of that economic transformation to invest in social infrastructure, to invest in education, and to ensure that that wealth was distributed and made sure that you had services for people, and more recently, quite good social protection with financial redistribution and making sure that people are protected against economic shocks. Is that there are some lessons to be learned there.
I want you to look ahead to November and to Doha and bring us to the World Summit for Social Development. And what needs to be done between now and then? And what do you hope comes out of that?
Last year at the General Assembly, the member states adopted the Pact for the Future, where they said we want a second World Summit for Social Development, 30 years after the first one in Copenhagen in '95. They said we need to revisit how we think about social development, and we need to make sure that we emphasize that social development dimension of sustainable development. So we have the three. We know there's a lot of work on the environmental and climate dimension of sustainable development, very important. There's a lot of work on the economic dimension of sustainable development, very important as well. But it's equally important that we really lift up and strengthen that social dimension of sustainable development.
Assistant Secretary General Sankir, thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Coming up.
This is literally the situation where your level of food insecurity cannot get any worse.
UN Insider.
All you need to know about China. China 24, only on CGTN.
Violence is escalating in Haiti. Armed gangs now control up to 90% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. More than 1,500 people were killed in the Caribbean nation in the first 3 months of this year. More than 1 million people are displaced, and for many, just finding enough food to survive is a struggle.
In the heart of the Caribbean, a silent crisis is unfolding. Haiti, a nation already plagued by extreme poverty, political instability, and widespread gang violence, is now gripped by a devastating wave of hunger. Today, more than 5.4 million Haitians, or half the population, struggle to find enough food. Among them, 2 million are in emergency levels of hunger, facing extreme food shortages and acute malnutrition.
1 in 2 Haitians at this moment don't have enough to eat. So on a global level, it's one of the most serious food insecurity crises in the world. But most concerning, we saw a small pocket of population, about 6,000 people, which were classified as being in the most serious level of food insecurity. It's level 5. It's what we call IPC catastrophe. So this is literally the situation where your level of food insecurity cannot get any worse.
With 57 deaths per 1,000 live births, Haiti has the highest child mortality rate in the Western Hemisphere, a trend largely fueled by hunger and malnutrition.
We've received a lot of underfed kids here recently. The numbers are increasing. We have a lot of kids, a lot of cases. Our beds are always full. Financial crisis, economic problems, displacement, people leaving their homes, all the difficult situations from the insecurity. All of this contributes to the increase of malnutrition cases.
Dr. Sain Saint-Sarin heads the pediatric department at the Universitaire La Paix Hospital, one of the last public hospitals in the capital still operating despite the insecurity. Every Wednesday, the department offers a special malnutrition program for infants.
We need an ICU. We need medications, appliances, and professionals. We need help. We need more people in the staff because the work is huge. We need all these things to move forward.
25-year-old Stephanie brought her 6-month-old son here last week after he had trouble breathing.
I can't say I've been able to feed him without problems because I'm not able to feed him everything he needs. I give him what little I have so as to keep him alive. The first symptom was the baby had a fever. After that, he had a cough. After a fit of coughing, he had a seizure. Thankfully, I was able to come here with him because I don't have any help. I really feel awful. Seeing the baby suffer is like a wound inside of me. With everything going on, I just don't have the financial means. Due to the insecurity, no matter where you go to search for a better life, it's impossible. You get stressed and there's nothing you can do.
For the past week, Marie-Allion Lucien has been worried her grandson might not survive.
They've been tireless in taking care of the baby here. It's thanks to God and the doctors. Last night, I really thought I would lose the baby. In fact, all during the past week, I thought he might die. But the doctors have done their very best to care for him. I'm 70 years old, and Haiti used to be a very good country where people could live well. I raised 6 kids of my own, and I worked very hard to take care of them all. The country was full of possibility. But now I don't have the means to do anything. I can't feed him enough, but I can't abandon him. I could never bring myself to give him to someone else, despite the fact that I can't feed him. Giving him away to someone else would be like putting him in a coffin, burying him, and leaving him for dead.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN insider.